Hello, welcome everybody to Sonic Talk number 409. In the UK here, at least, it is swelteringly hot, the hottest day since a very long time ago. And it's no difference here. If you can hear the air conditioning working, I've already blown one extension because I'd forgotten that I had it plugged into something that was coiled and it just blew the fuse. So I thought for a terrible minute I wasn't even going to have that because it really is unbearably warm here. But, you know, only happens once or twice a year. And in fact, we should be glad that it didn't happen at Glastonbury because there would have been all sorts of casualties. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. We want to say hello to everybody in the chat room. I'm surprised there are this many because, frankly, if I was given a choice of being inside or outside today, I'd probably be in a swimming pool. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's very much appreciated. We know, I hope you know, how much fun you make that extra little bit of frisson that we know there's evidence of people actually watching us do this live because we all thoroughly enjoy it. And, of course, it's our super brain that helps with the fact that may escape myself, certainly, from time to time. I'm just being distracted by people making faces at the camera, which is absolutely what's expected of. Anyway, I also want to say thank you very much to iZotope sponsoring the show. If you stay tuned, about halfway through, we'll be running a competition to win a copy. Somebody's got me coming back at them. Who's that? Anyway, I'll switch them off for the time being. Sorry, that was very distracting. Anyway, so basically, stay tuned. You can win a copy of iZotope Ozone 6. We'll be swapping up the prizes next week, so stay tuned. And also, what else? There was something else. Oh, yes, I forgot. Do subscribe to us on YouTube. We're always looking for more subscribers, particularly as this the number of followers and subscribers you have has such a high currency in this world today. But please do subscribe because not only will you help us out, you'll also get news of the first things that we upload to YouTube sort of pretty much instantly. So do it. Anyway, right. Let's start with Mr. Mark Doty. We have Mr. Mark Doty in the house. Oh, well, in his house, or in a house. I don't know if it's his house or not. But Mark Doty, Bob Moog Foundation, synth expert. You're starting to bang out those videos now, Mark. I'm starting to feel a bit threatened.
Well, hopefully it won't go on. It's, yeah, that's
can't take any more.
Load. No more, please, no more analog synths. Yeah.
I've got a JDXA here. Which is actually, you might, and I had it last week, but I didn't really play it very much. I've been digging into that. It's quite interesting. A lot of voices, but I might mention a little bit about what my initial discoveries are of it anyway, because you may or may not be interested. I'm not sure whether you will, Mark, but if you're not, you could just stay quiet. Anyway, Mark Doty, of course, Bob Moog Foundation, where he's the archivist, video guy, all sorts of things he does there. So do check out his great work. So thanks for joining us, Mark. It's been a pleasure to have you so far.
Thank you. Thank you.
That sounds like I was about to stop the show. It's not, honestly. I told you my brain was fried. Anyway, let's head over to... Oh, wow, look at that, man. Hey, man. It's a Glastonbury casualty, Mr. Gaz Williams.
Yep, absolutely. Like, fried. Anyone who goes to Glastonbury knows it takes about a week to sort of... just to get back to normality. It's such a removal from just everyday life. It's an amazing sense of freedom, I think, Glastonbury. It's brilliant. It's amazing it's still happening. But I had a really excellent time of things. And I got to do quite a few gigs there in the end. So I had a main gig on one of the main stages, but then did like an improvised vocal gig just with singing with the World Government, a brilliant Bristol funk band, in a backstage party at the acoustic tent. And we had a great fun. But it's like on the spot, kind of just making up lyrics on the spot. And trying to sort of remain sane, but just lapsing into just like.
I should point out that the acoustic stage party always used to be the famous because I used to run the acoustic stage you know, the stage manager there for a while, and that was usually the crew party. So you'd end up basically it's at the end of the festival when everybody is completely wiped out. And yeah, but I'm glad you had a good one there, Gaz. Gaz, of course, also bass player. You may have seen we posted a video that Ed, who was also at Glastonbury, one of our other contributors, saw of you in action on one of the stages. So that was very popular.
That was playing with with Matuki. Ah, cool. Matuki. It was his first ever gig, and it was on. You know, so it was great fun to go and play a big stage on the first ever gig as well. It's been quite a few months rehearsal, but. You know, it went down really well.
Excellent.
And it's Afrobeat. It's funky. It was sunny. You know, what's not to like? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Brilliant. Really
absolutely.
great.
Well, great. I'm glad you had a good time. We're going to talk a bit more about Glastonbury later. But meanwhile, we've got more guests. Can you believe it? Richard Hilton is over there in Connecticut, where it's also swelteringly hot, I'd imagine. And he is keyboard player for Chic, a man accustomed to playing festivals, large stages and all that sort of thing. So just, you know, another day at the office, but also where he works at the studio and waxing hot records for Mr. Nile Rodgers as well. How are you, Rich?
Very well, thank you.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. You got Glastonbury envy, or because you played last year famously, and it was a real. Was it last year? Yes, it was last year. Where it was
13.
13, the year before.
Maybe just a tiny bit, but we did a huge gig in Hyde Park the week before,
That's
so
right,
I have
of course.
nothing to complain about.
You probably played to all of those people anyway, because they probably just went straight down the glass. I must so notice, because I think Lionel Richie experienced the Glastonbury phenomenon, because he played this year, and he came off stage and they interviewed him, and he just looked completely blown away by what happened, how many people knew the words to his songs.
He had the biggest crowd of the whole weekend.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah. Bigger than all the big headliners. He pulled the biggest crowd to the pyramid.
Bigger than even Kanye West, who was appalling, I'm afraid.
Kanye West has done an extraordinary thing to his career. You know, he's absolutely devastated any shred of credibility within the British music scene. You know,
it wasn't his finest hour, or Glastonbury's finest hour.
It's quite astonishing, but you know, he is an enigma and a unique character, and I'm kind of glad it is.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But it would have helped if he'd been actually better as well. That would have been okay. Anyway, I haven't got round to Robbie. Have you got Glastonbury envy? It's not all that far from where you are in the world.
I had a terrible gig nightmare at the weekend. We were playing at Olympic Park Village in London, and I left Maidenhead, where my parents live, at 11 in the morning. And bear in mind, this is a 28-mile journey to get to Olympic Park Village. I got there at 10 to 4, 10 minutes before I was on stage.
Oh, my God.
Whoa.
I was like, I didn't realise. I went into London, there was Gay Pride, there was Veterans Day, there was something else. Every single thing got diverted. And I literally got there, put my stage clothes on, ran on stage, played the gig. It was just like the most horrendous stress ever.
Oh, well done. How did the gig go, though? Did you release all of that tension?
It went great. Yeah, it went great. Thank goodness we got a good tech who got everything sorted. But
wow.
Yeah, everyone was ringing me from the band to Howard, like going, "Where are you? Where are you? Where are you?"
Well, this is a good. This means that next time you'll have to use Howard's helicopter for your own purposes, rather than his just sightseeing around various parts of the world, right?
I can live without that stress again, I can tell you.
Of course, Robbie Bronman, the reason we're talking about this gig, Robbie Bronman is MD and sort of keyboard player, and runs the show effectively for the Howard Jones Experience, which I seem to have christened him as. I quite like the idea of that on a poster, the Howard Jones Experience.
Yeah, I like that as well. I'll float the idea.
Yeah, see how it goes. I don't want any credit, just maybe a ticket or two when it comes my way. Yeah. When they become works of art and collector's items because they only lasted for like 24 hours before everyone went, what a stupid idea. Anyway, right. Well, let's get on with it, shall we? Hold on. I think I've just got one more thing. Well, I wanted to start with a sort of notion of Glastonbury because obviously, both Gaz and Robbie have played kind of last-minute festival or large venue gigs, and this whole notion of you rock up and you do your thing, but it kind of introduced a sort of wider notion about the thought of monitoring, stage monitoring particularly, because as many of us know, what happens when you're in the rehearsal room in the studio, you're working on your things, you do your stuff, you go on stage, and it's not what you expect to hear at all, and then you have to make all these compromises. Well, what do I only need to hear to be able to actually perform to the best of my abilities? And that is quite a difficult transition for many people, because it's a bit like when you hear your own voice recorded for the first time and you go, God, is that me? And sadly I've got over that many years ago, but I just was curious about how that whole thing works, because I mean most of you guys have got some experience of this, and I know when I was doing a lot of live sound engineering, quite often the front of house would be doing monitors as well, which in many ways makes it easier, especially if it's your band, because you know what they want and you know what's missing when they're missing the note or missing something. Whereas if you've got your own monitor guy, then he does that. But sometimes you don't get any of that stuff, and you've just got to kind of wing it. And I was just curious, Gaz, you played a couple of gigs on different sort of size venue stages. Are you still there? You seem to have frozen.
Yeah. Have I frozen?
You have. You've frozen in quite an artistic, poignant sort of pose. Okay. You're sort of staring into the middle distance, looking quite maybe.
But a bit like Jeff Lynne.
Yeah, I like that. Because you mentioned this as well. You mentioned you had some issues with monitoring, and also the fact that the other fact was that you've got this issue of being much further apart, perhaps, than you usually are, right?
If the monitoring isn't right.
Yeah, a bit like this show at the moment, by the thing. Maybe, Gaz, what you need to do is, if you hang up and come back to us, then maybe we can pick you up. But let's go to Robbie. I mean, you showed up at this gig, and
we learned this a long time ago because of our lineup. We don't have to contend with loads of open mics, which is often the bane of the live of the monitor guy.
Yes.
So. But we do have a lot of channels, and it's quite a lot of stuff that often the monitor guys are a bit freaked out about when we say, can we have the vocal effects that are coming from Ableton back in this and that? And it's all a bit alien because it's not like their normal gig. So we learned quite a while ago that we were just going to take the law into our own hands. So we travel with the Roland V-mixing system. So we have our own front of house desk, which is tiny, which has just got 24 flying faders. And it runs down Ethernet to the front of house, and we all have our own on-stage stage boxes for mixing our own live sound. And generally, we turn up to a gig, we turn them on, I adjust the level of Howard's vocal in it, because of depending what the room's like or the gig, and I have a feed for a separate sub for the amount of bass I want, and that's it. And I never change anything, and it's the same sound every gig. And it's just, and it's the same for everyone, for me, for the drummer, for Howard. That's all we have to contend with, and it just works every time. And it doesn't make you rely on anyone at a festival, which is what we don't want to have to do.
Yeah, I think that's probably quite a smart move in many ways. And what about the notion of, because obviously when you're in production rehearsals, presumably you're much closer together, so things like eye contact and the sense of timing that you get. Perhaps not in this gig, but those are things that you have to kind of, it takes a little bit of time to get used to, right?
Well, we always set up in a triangle formation, and we try and set up in rehearsals in exactly the same way, with Howard kind of at the apex of it, and myself to one side and Johnny. But on stage, we don't, if we've got a big stage, we don't generally spread it all out really across the stage, otherwise it just looks silly. 3 people kind of disparate, kind of in
2 blokes in the corner and somebody in the middle, yeah.
So we still focus it as quite a compact unit in the middle, and let Howard work the stage with his guitar and the visuals and all that.
He really does work the stage with the guitar. That is such a, he is so good on the guitar. He is a
guitar master.
Totally justifies their existence.
There could be a synth gag in there. I'm thinking of the word guitaro. How do you feel about that? I think that's almost a gag.
It was actually very fortuitous because for years he literally was one of the first people to adopt the KX5, the Yamaha, the classic Yamaha. And he's been very disparaging of any other guitar over the years because he's got this whole bee in his bonnet that all the other ones have big keys and they just look like you're strapping a piano around your neck. So, unfortunately, he bought up all the last stocks of the KX5s, literally, when Yamaha stopped doing them. And we had like 6 new in the box, and we've kind of gone through them over the years.
Worn them out.
And the last one literally got worn out on last year's tour, just in time for Korg to release their one with mini keys, and he's now totally in love with that. So.
That's interesting. What was it that went on them, just out of interest?
Sometimes the logic board on the MIDI, sometimes keys would just stop working, so we wouldn't have a full keyboard. Sometimes the strip, it's just, one of those things. But yeah, the Korg one's great because it's got the strip along the front, the long ribbon, as well as the one on the neck.
Excellent. Well, that's worth knowing if you're looking for a guitar. Mark, are you looking for one of those? I mean, I mean, when we first met, you were coming over to England and playing gigs. You were doing sort of one-man shows. Was it one-man shows?
Yes.
I guess monitoring's not so much of an issue there because you just go, what do I want more of me, please? And that's pretty straightforward. But, I mean, presumably, have you been in band situations where you've had to figure out getting the monitoring right?
Oh, absolutely. And, I mean, basically for me, I don't know if you guys agree with this, but in my experience, I was in a band in the aughts, and we did a lot of touring and playing in various places, including a couple of festivals. And I basically have found that if the sound man is not your sound man, and even sometimes if it is, the keyboard is just never in the monitor mix ever at all. And I basically got used to not having monitoring because I could never hear. And whenever I would complain, it was like a burden. It's like, oh, the keyboard player, he wants to be heard too? What? Oh, okay. And I don't know. So yeah, it's always been a problem for any live situation for me, monitoring. It's a nightmare.
I wonder if that's something to do with the fact of, because it's a full range, and generally with monitor mixes you try and kind of, certainly if you're using wedges, you try and limit the frequency that each instrument occupies, just so that there's not so much stuff going on stage. I don't know, what do you think, Rich? I mean, I'm guessing, as we spoke to you about the front of house sound before, and you've got your own monitor guys, but I mean, that transition into kind of needing to hear what you need, because you're a big band, so I mean, I guess you don't need to hear everybody, but sometimes, with other bands...
Of course I do.
You do?
Of course I do.
Cool.
Why wouldn't I?
I don't know. I mean, sometimes you have to make compromises.
It should sound like a record in my head while we're playing
it.
Exactly. Why wouldn't I?
No, that's fair enough. Harder to achieve with...
Why would I accept anything less?
I like your style, Rich.
But I mean, as kindly as possible and within the constraints of time, because you don't always get there. Depends on whether or not you know the guy. In our case, 90% of our gigs are done with one of two people or three people that we've worked with before, and one of those guys is, in my mind, the god of monitor engineering. And the others, we can work. We just have to have a good time to sound check, and everybody has to get a moment with their say. And that moment kind of has to, once it's all been gone through 9 people on stage, then you have to play a bit and then have a second round. And if you get that, you can get pretty close to what you need most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a challenge. I mean, I always used to get hired because the bands were large and difficult. Never got really easy ones where it was nice and simple to set up a monitor mix and sort them out. It would be percussionists and brass. And like you said, Robbie, when there's lots of mics on stage, it makes it really hard, especially with percussionists. Why can't I hear my bell tree? All that sort of stuff.
Quite often the problem, I think, with bands, particularly when bands start up, is they don't really know what they need to hear or how to articulate what they want to hear. That's harder. That's harder to kind of, for monitor engineers to kind of interpret. Quite often, if a singer doesn't have much technical background or whatever, I've been in so many situations like that with singers just asking random things which really aren't what they need, but they think it's kind of going to get them where they want to, and it's very hard for the engineers to kind of put their translator on to get to that point.
Yeah.
And by the same token, you have the singer that consistently needs to be louder, and while you're making him or her louder, that person is singing quieter and quieter to the point where you can hear the air conditioner across the room.
Yeah, I remember that particular job and having that time. It's getting it right to make them project. I was talking, in fact, when I was at Synth Meet, Cymru Beats Synth Meet this weekend in Cardiff, and I think Mr. Simon Jones is in the chat room, or he was earlier, so hello to you, where he put on a great event. And I met Thipal Sandra, who said hi to you, Gaz, and he said he's been working with Liz Fraser. And he just said, he was playing keyboards in the gigs. And because I remember I went to see Liz Fraser, I might have mentioned it on a podcast, just happened to be playing in Bath. And she sings quieter than she speaks. And she speaks pretty quietly. I mean, it's a psychological thing with her. She's just really not into projecting herself in public. She's very, very uncomfortable with it. And I just remember seeing that. And they had, I forget the guy, he's a Scottish bloke, and he does really big acts. He's the main go-to guy who does all of the, I think he's called Rob somebody. He does all the Avid venue sort of demos. He was there, and I remember I did an interview with him, and he's a really experienced, he did Massive Attack as well, which is probably why he got the gig. And even he couldn't manage to make it work, though he was trying his damnedest. It was just almost impossible. And sometimes those situations are unavoidable, and you've just got to kind of, I don't know what you've got to do in that situation. If you've got a live drummer, not much you can do apart from, I don't know what you can do. But anyway, I thought it was just an interesting point. But thank you very much for your input. Maybe what you need is more JDXA in your monitors.
Can I?
Yes.
Can I just tell a little story of monitoring from this weekend?
Oh yeah, please.
So we did a main gig, and that was great, and the on-stage monitoring was great, but we were asked to do like a smaller gig. It was still a reasonable sized stage, and in fact it was actually quite a wide stage, and that's part of the problem, but it was quite hurried, and there wasn't much well, there was no sound check at all, just a very, very, very basic line check, and there was so bad monitoring, and everyone was so far away. You could just feel the groove was just, you know, musicians talk about playing in the pocket, and like this was a big, saggy, baggy coal sack of a pocket, you know. It was just really hard to sort of, you know, be. It just felt really weird because of the time lag.
Oh, what, the actual physical?
They also committed a heinous crime to me. They supplied my bass backline with a PVT TKO amplifier. Oh my word, it was awful.
Oh dear.
Because I'd played through a lovely 8x10 SVT valve jobby the day before. It was a really substandard amplifier, and I was playing like a. I went down the front.
Wait.
Oh!
Hey! God, that is small. If you're lifting that up, Mark, that's pretty small, actually. I feel for you, Gaz.
But I went down the front.
Should be the PV Hercules.
But it just couldn't deliver the headroom that I wanted, and I went to do a solo, and I couldn't. I had a complete like. So I just was doing these big, ugly clunks. Clunk! I was doing a protest solo. I was protesting against this amp. And then it occurred to me a little bit into the solo that a protest solo is no good for anyone, you know. Now I've got a dilemma because at the moment I'm just mastering a desk mix to give to all the other band members. And I come up with this thing. I was like, ooh, I could snip that bit out, you know, just remove a little, because this will probably be the thing that will be remembered from the band of that gig, so I could just remove a little piece of time and then just give it out to everybody else, you know. But no, what I've done is I've kept it in, but because I got this joyous thing working again, I just dubbed loads of weird little squiggles and OP1isms in to the solo now. So it's this really weird psychedelic little odd little thing. I thought, don't get rid of it, turn it into a
feature.
You know.
Yes.
So it's not strictly true, but it is kind of to make up for that amplifier crime. But I mean, you see, that was a monitoring issue. I just couldn't get the, you know, and I'm trying to play with big cojones, if you know what I mean. And like, you know, it's sort of, if you
haven't got any.
Getting that from, it's, yeah.
That sounds tricky. Yeah, well, that's difficult. I can understand your problem. It feels like this is probably a good place to put that. I thought this topic might run and run, and it's provided endless entertainment for me, so thank you very much. But in the meantime, let's just have a little chat from our sponsors. This is the point just afterwards where we announce last week's competition winner, and you get to enter the competition to win Ozone. What is it? Ozone, iZotope Ozone. That's assuming I can get the ad to play. This always happens to me. I don't know why it is. There we go. Ozone 6. It is the de facto mastering standard for many people, in fact. And we have to say, you know, 6.1 is a great upgrade. We've got essential mastering tools: equalizer, dynamic maximizer, exciter, imager, post equalizer, dither, and dynamic EQ advanced only. You can harness the sonic texture of classic analog gear with deeper digital control, make smarter mix decisions with real-time visual feedback throughout all modules. You can quickly achieve authentic sounds for any genre, and it works really great on the 2-bus or on the individual tracks or buses, all sorts of things. So if you want to check out Ozone 6 and you haven't won a copy yet, then you should go to iZotope.com/Ozone, and there's, as with all of their products, there's a 10-day free demo, and there's lots and lots of really brilliant tutorial material, manuals, all sorts of stuff, and creative ways that you could use that. So do check it out. And of course, we do have a winner from last week. Last week's winner, we asked you to tweet out Deep Digital Control as a hashtag, and Ozone 6, of course, to @SonicStakeNet, iZotope Week Inc. And last week's winner is a chap called Luca Proetti. And here's, let me see, I've made that text very small. It's actually very hard for me to see. So let me see if I can make that a bit bigger. Oh, no, I can't. It's Luca Pro, @Luca Pro. So if you get in touch with me via Twitter or anyone at Sonic State, then we will pass your details on to the iZotope Fairy, who is lightning fast at the moment. She's a very responsive fairy. We've got fairy number 2 in this position, and she is super quick. So thank you very much, and please do check out Ozone 6.1. But there is also another competition for this week. So this week we're talking, we want you to tweet the hashtag 4EQ modes. That's 4 EQ modes, one word, and the hashtag Ozone6 with 6 on the end if you're not watching this on video, and to @Sonic State and @iZotope Inc. And of course there are many more characters available in a tweet, so you should fill it up with something amusing or something that you wanted to say to us or to iZotope, or just generally speaking. We're perfectly happy to read them, and thank you very much for entering in advance, and also thanks to iZotope for sponsoring the show. Right, I have a video. Now, this was something I shot at Cymru Beats. This is the AJH mini mod. These are... Let's see if I can turn those up a bit. There we go. These are essentially, they're recreations of the Model D circuitry and discrete Euroack components. And Alan has basically spent quite a long time working on these. I'll stop that now because he starts talking and it's not so interesting to listen over the podcast because I'm talking too. Just a really interesting idea, and from what I gather, they sound absolutely fantastic. The thing that I find quite interesting about this is this, because we've had this whole notion of reboots, and obviously, you know, this is a different sort of flavour because we've had the ARP Odyssey and we've had the Korg Odyssey, we've had the MS-20 Mini. So there's actually quite a lot of potential here for sort of discreetly manufacturing individual components of synthesizers. I don't know, Mark, I know I'm going to come to you first because obviously, you know, you work for the Moog Foundation, which is not Moog itself. But have you heard anything about these things? I mean, they seem kind of quite keenly priced, and I don't know what the thought is. I did ask Alan about it, and he said, well, we haven't, you know, we're not actually calling them the M word, so I don't know what you think about them, but they're supposed to be pretty cool. And you haven't got any modular stuff, so I suppose it's going to be something you'd have to dive into fully. Euroack, I mean.
And I think it would be worth it. Oh, am I?
Yeah, no, I can hear.
I seem to be lagging pretty terribly.
I can see,
okay.
I can hear you.
And I think it'd be. I think it would be totally worth it. I mean, I have always said, why not go back and grab the exact components of these synthesizers and make them? Because there's no such thing as a patent on the Mini Moog or any of that technology, really. So, I mean, there's obviously the word is trademarked, but that technology, you can't trademark the technology. So I think this is fantastic, and I'm really curious about how it sounds. I was a little bit worried, though, when he said that they made the oscillator more stable, because, I mean, part of that sound of the RA Moog is how unstable the oscillator is. So I worry that if you stabilize the oscillator, you might have lost, well, while gaining tuning, you might have lost some of the
unpredictability, yeah,
mojo, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know, I understand that. That's actually a very good point. I think he addressed it in that they've tried to make it a bit more stable, but they obviously, the fine line is kind of how far do you go, because you sort of want it to work, but you also want it to have that character, and that's a very good point. Anything else you'd like to see actually created along these lines? Because there's so much stuff out there, sort of classic stuff.
Well, I mean, I don't. Some of the schematics still exist. I'd love to see the Moog Lyra come back. There was only one of them made, and I'm really curious about it because it's one of the few synthesizers that Bob directly had his hands in. Unlike so many of the later Moog synthesizers that Bob was not involved in, he was involved with the Lyra, and I'd love to see that come back. But yeah, I don't know how likely that's going to be.
Let's see if I can find if that. Hold on, there seems to be a picture here. Let me see if I can find a picture. Oh, hold on, that's the wrong one. That's what I want to see. Video plays when you don't want it to. Bloody hell! Right, so is that the Moog? Is that what you're talking about?
Yep. Yes.
Let me see if I can make that bigger. Oh, it looks a bit like one of those Korg, the old Korg piano strings things, actually. It's got the same sort of form factor. Is that it? That's the only one that exists? That's mental.
Yes. It was part of the constellation used by Emerson but it just never made it into production, and it's really sad because I've never heard one. In fact, most people haven't, although Keith Emerson did use it in recordings, and it does exist in recordings, but it's a really interesting and unique synthesizer, especially from Moog, if you look at the architecture of it. And I'd love to see someone bring that back.
Well, that sounds good. That sounds like a great idea. I know, Rich, I mean, these things apparently, I know you haven't gone for the full Eurorack experience just yet. I'm sure by the time we finish broadcasting Sonic Talks episode, when we reach maybe episode 2000 or something, I'm determined to
see a modular behind me, right?
But this is a pretty cool notion, you think?
Yes, very much. I loved this video. Dig the guy. The stuff he played, those oscillators sounded great. We didn't spend too much time with the filter in that video.
No.
Or the envelopes. But the oscillators sounded fantastic, and I had every reason to believe that everything else would be of similar and equal design quality. And his discussion of how he steps voltages up and down to make sure that the internal voltages in those modules in a Eurorack are behaving like the originals was fascinating to me. And in general, it was a highly enjoyable video. Nick, I commend you and that nice gentleman who built those modules.
Well, thank you. I think they're roughly around about, I think they go from about 150, was it 150 to 245, I think. I might
have been 299 or so. The oscillator, I think, was the most expensive
245, I think that was, yeah.
Yeah, all right. And then the filter, I think, was 199 or 195 in pounds. How much
does it cost to build a Model D?
I guess it's going to be around about $1,000, isn't it? £1,000. So I would imagine something like that.
Plus the house,
maybe more.
Plus the case, plus all that.
Yeah, that's true. But assuming
maybe more. 50, probably 15 by the time you're done.
Yeah, I suppose so. Unless you already have that. I don't know, Robbie. Have you got room for one of these? I mean, it does take an entire width. Although he did have a couple.
I've got the old the rack mount, Moog, the Voyager rack mount.
Ah, yeah, got you.
Yeah, so I love that. It's my kind of, for me, it's the perfect blend of something I can turn on and rely on, and a bit of that kind of sound. So I mean, as I've said before, my interest in Eurorack is not trying to kind of recreate classic analog synths in Eurorack format. My interest in the Eurorack is to use all the kind of weird and wonderful modules that are outside of that world, and create more of a kind of a sound processing,
right,
kind of experimental thing. So I think it's great for people who want to dip their toes into that and get a bit of experience with that kind of sound. But I don't think it's something I'm particularly looking to kind of. It's the same with the Roland modules as well. The new ones,
the 500.
Again, I love the idea of it, and I think it's great that for in one row you could get essentially a whole voice or two voices of a system 100/700 or whatever it is. But it's not really what I'm wanting to do in my Eurorack.
One thing that was kind of also quite illuminating to see how I almost avoided saying interesting there at the Cymru Beats was how many people had A, microbrutes in their setups, and B, make noise modules. They were everywhere, and also the clouds. God, who's that guy?
Wow.
Sorry,
Mutable
Instruments. Lots of that stuff there, and those seem to be very popular brands. I mean, there wasn't an enormous number of people. Most of the guys who were there were performing, but they had that kind of stuff, and that was really quite an eye opener in many ways. Because I've got a piece. I think I put it up today with Adam John Williams, who we spoke about. He was performing there, and he had a mutable, a Nu 3, I think it was, and also a microbrute. And then the Somatic Responses guys had microbrute and a lot of 4MS stuff and some Pittsburgh. But the other guy who I haven't put the video out for, VCO ADSR, who is fantastic. When you meet him, you think he's a sort of jolly, nice, enthusiastic sort of guy. He doesn't strike me as an analog sort of techno performer monster that he actually is when you see him do it. And he's got one of those Circlon sequencers, and his stuff was just mind-blowing. It really was pretty good. But yeah, really cool stuff. I don't know, Gaz, did you have anything you wanted to add to the notion of the AJH and Moog modules? Mini-mod modules, rather?
It may be the gateway drug.
Man.
I mean, I was thinking about it. I've always wanted a Model D. I borrowed one off Dipole Sandra once for a while, and it was just a pleasure and a joy to have hold of. And you know, as good as the Voyager is, I don't know, it's something. It's just different. It's different. I think it's the simplicity of the Model D was so lovely, and just to be able to recreate that. Ooh.
Yeah.
But then within that framework.
Yeah, lots of mod possibilities there.
Yeah. Oh, God, that's tempting. That's, you know, my antenna went up a little bit on that one.
Yeah. Well, Gaz, it could be the time. I mean, the other thing that was interesting, he told me a story about, and I had heard this, about the fact that the original design of the filter, there was a miscalculation in the electronics, and so in fact the filter had been driven by 15 to 20 dB more than was originally specified, which actually sort of created the sound that people then kind of fell in love with, so they kept it. And just that little nugget of information, I think I posted a Facebook video of that, and I just thought that is a beautiful little kind of synopsis of the whole thing, how that sort of happy accident created essentially an entire genre and a whole, you know, legacy of sound in many ways. You know, that was great. I'm sure you're familiar with that particular story. Have you got any other facts that
Yes.
He didn't name the guy? I mean, I don't know. I'm guessing it
was Jim Scott.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So there's
Jim Scott was
two
fantastic.
sides to that, isn't there? First of all, it's like, what have you done? You blew it. You didn't do what you were supposed to do. But on the other side, you created something super fantastic. So yeah.
Well, yeah, it's hard to imagine Bob being okay with such a thing or letting such a thing happen, because he was so precise and he was so intent on being precise. But a lot of the Mini-Moog happened when Bob was out of town, actually when he was in England talking to EMS about the VCS3. Anyway, but yeah, so some of that design happened while Bob was out of town, but Bob also had an incredibly musical ear, and undoubtedly he heard that and was like, okay, you know. But yeah, the whole Mini-Moog story is incredible and bizarre, and yeah, it's a crazy story.
Well, we certainly wish AJH Synth. If you want to go to ajhsynth.com and you can check out his range of stuff. They're also available in a rather sexy black livery as well, which is a new look, which has different knob caps. Because you've got the let me see. Oh no, I can't see. There's the silver one. That's right. And then there's that's the full Model D, and then there's the black one, which I think will probably come up in a second. Anyway, let's move onwards and upwards. This is also pretty awesome. This is a trailer for a film called LFO, which actually was out a little while ago. This was sent in by a chap called Ben1210, who messaged me on YouTube, which in the summer is great because there's well, any time is great, but in the summer when topics are generally a little light on the ground. This basically, the story of this is a guy who discovers, he's messing around in his basement, and he discovers a combination of waves that can affect people and hypnotize them, and he sort of turned it into this kind of sci-fi comedy thriller type film, which I'd love to see. Actually, I haven't had a chance to check it out, but it did very, very well. And interestingly enough, it was written by the guy who, I don't know if you've ever read it, a guy called Patrick Carlson, who wrote a book called The 100-Year-Old Man Who Jumped Out the Window and Disappeared, which is a brilliant book, really, really good book. So I'm expecting the writing of this film is going to be great. But a really interesting notion, oh damn, I got one in there, that you can create specific combinations, because we've all, we may know of theta waves where you collect two low frequencies that create a beat that's even more low, and if you amplify it enough, it does really weird things to biological material. And I just wondered if there were any other effects that, you synthesists or people who've been working with sound have come across that have really strange effects on people.
Can I just say?
Yeah.
I in very diligent manner, I went and downloaded this movie from iTunes last night and watched it.
Oh, excellent! Is it good?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Tell me it's good.
It's good. I did enjoy it. It's got some really it's got some really geeky things about it that synth people and little kind of subversive little references that only geeky music people would know. But yeah, it's kind of really out there, random. It's a little bit hokey, but it's definitely worth seeing for any musos. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Oh, well, I'm glad.
And it's got a great soundtrack. The soundtrack, I think, is great.
It would absolutely have to, wouldn't it?
And it was just made, apparently, and then, like I said, it was just made with just an analog 4. The
Really?
soundtrack. The whole soundtrack. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
that is interesting.
There you go.
But I mean, on the tote, I mean, Mark, I'm guessing a man of many synthesizers. Have you ever found that certain synthesizer tones or combinations have strange effects on the listener?
Well, they certainly do to me, but I haven't been able to engage in any sort of mind control despite extensive efforts. I mean, you guys think I'm a demonstrator, but really I'm testing out each synthesizer to see if I can get all of you to do what I want. So far, it hasn't been that effective, but I keep trying. So this movie is kind of an inspiration to me. So.
It is good. I mean, there are, there must be. I mean, in the way that fifths have a sort of very pleasing effect in certain scales, and those sort of oscillator intervals and pulse width does it for me. You know, there are certain things that just really do make, and I guess, you know, in many ways, the super saw exists because it gives people this idea of an army of synthesizers all playing at the same time that kind of have an effect. So I suppose there probably are numerous examples in many ways of how this could work.
Well, one of the things that I think about, and I've been using a continuum lately, and it's like changed my life, and I can't get enough of it. And largely, it ties into one of the things that's true about synthesis in general. And I know some people will be like, what? No, but really the human voice is what really guides us musically. And the things that instruments do that are similar to what our voices do. I mean, the whole filter sweep is the reason we love that so much is because it's so similar to what we do with our mouths. And I mean, a filter sweep is literally a thing that we do with our mouths, and we love it because it's a fun thing. It's a fun noise to make with our mouths as well as hear. But I really think that we do have the power to affect people's emotions to some degree. I mean, it's the whole point of music with synthesis. But as for actual direct control, I don't know.
There's in the chat room one day Sonic 7608 so one day I was messing with a comb filter and ultimately produced a sound that made my friend yell out. He then apologized saying, sorry, that sound just made me realize that one day I will cease to exist. Now that's a pretty powerful sound. I know, Rich, I mean, you've kind of in terms of music recording and production, I mean, are there combinations of sound that do strange things to people that have a specific effect? You know, outside of the kind of the way of supporting the vocal or making the bass drum sound a certain way, that have sort of physical or psychological reaction.
I'm trying to decide if there's a sound or a set of sounds that doesn't.
Ah, well, that's a really good answer. Yeah, to some degree, of course. Yeah.
It seems to me all sound does. From spoken communications with language to sung melodic stuff. The birds gather around out here, out the window sometimes, if there's music playing. And then I witness our concerts as a band. And when we come together, those particular people, and make a particular noise that we make, it seems to elicit a certain response. And I'm not ready to, I'm not Pavlov or anything, but there's some kind of correlation going on, and I can't really describe it to you any more specifically than that.
So, I mean, yes, I see what you're saying. I mean, the psychoacoustics and the psychology of that is immensely complicated. That's interesting a notion. Gaz, you're a bass player, so obviously your ability to fundamentally affect people in the low frequency has there must be certain notes, or perhaps for certain rooms, that do things to people.
Yeah, I mean, playing Fuji Rock in 2013 with Carl Hyde, that rig has just got the most amazing bottom end. It's Fuji Rock festivals out in the mountains. There's no noise limiters on them, so you get a really brilliant sound. So the reason why I'm mentioning that was, I don't know, it was playing a tune that was in C.
Right.
So a C, and that's not a particularly low note, but it just seemed to have this enormous, beautiful texture in that situation. So I think sometimes they have different relationships. Sometimes some keys where you're playing just sound amazing. I don't, I wonder why that is. You know, whether there's just some sort of I don't know.
Well, it's like a harmonic resonance. Sorry, Robbie.
I was going to say that was always the bane of my life when I did a lot of remix work. Was sometimes you get a song and it's in an absolutely great key and everything you did just fit together and you thought, oh, it's great. And then sometimes it would come in the most god awful key where bass lines just sounded like they were either too high or they were just bottoming out, and you could never quite get that, you know, that sweet spot, and you end up trying to overdrive the bass to bring out the harmonics. And you know, there is definitely keys and stuff that are much more satisfying than others for certain types of music.
Yeah.
I suppose in many ways it also depends to a degree on the advance in listening technologies as well. You know, as speakers and everything's become more efficient and we can produce a wider range of frequencies, you know, sometimes, you know, that window of effectivity is going to be shifting in time, particularly now where we can get kind of quite large bass responses. Even though somehow it's synthesized itself out of small speakers, you can still kind of generate that sense of excitement. And I wonder if many ways the whole notion of this sort of tubed toothpaste waveform, the loudness wars, effectively they recreate the notion of everything, of something being really loud, like when you're in a gig and you just get that sense of excitement, the kind of pumping compression that just is it's an affectation. It's something that we use to sort of make us feel like we are at the club or are experiencing those sounds. Maybe, I don't know. I can only apologise. There are obviously it's hot where everybody is, and the fans at everybody's rooms are going crazy, which is why there's a lot of background noise today, because it's just sort of 30 degrees mostly in most places. But yeah, anyway, that looks like a really good fun film to watch, and I will, Robbie, check that out. You got it on iTunes, so
yes, it's on iTunes. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Nick,
Yes.
can we just make a very quick insert to sort of about Chris Squire from Yes, who's sadly passed away?
Sure.
Just because he's my biggest influence, and it was an hour before, in the hour, 10 minutes before I was going on stage, I found out about it, and it was quite a weird feeling because he's a huge influence on me. But we're talking about sound. His sound, the bass sounds that he got, especially on those early classic Yes albums. Wow, there's something quite cosmic about that quality of sound. I'm sure Rich would agree with me on that. The Chris Squire tone is, wow, he got the sound. He really transformed the bass guitar, I think.
Well, I'm not familiar with much of Yes's work, so I'll have to go back and have a listen, but no, it's a fair point.
Well, if you take a song like Heart of the Sunrise, and the kind of the driving sound of the bass guitar on that is such a thrilling sound. It's, you know, wow. And people have tried to play like that, but no one really quite got it. He had something that I still listen to it. It's smoking. He's so good.
Excellent.
Well, if I may jump on Gaz's point for a moment, one of the things he was able to do was create bass melodies that were as recognizable and hummable as the main song melodies were. And quite often, as you go through sections of their songs, you'd be kind of humming along with the bass melody.
I see what you mean.
Really distinctive in that way, his melodic contribution and his willingness to abandon just playing roots and creating long walking lines that had bass notes that were not necessarily the roots of the chords.
Well, amen to that, and thank you very much for that extra contribution. I've put a gate across you, Mark, because your fan is the bizarrely, even though you say it's not that hot there, is the one. And now Rich seems to have switched devices. He's now.
Yeah. I had a power outage that caused me to completely disconnect. So the first thing that came up was the router, so I got on my laptop instead.
Oh, well, thank you. That's what we call sort of real time. That's the thing about live, folks. Anything can happen, and just did. So anyway, thank you. Right,
I actually turned my fan off, so I'm not sure.
I think it's just the way that things happen. I mean, it doesn't matter. Anyway, this is another video that's got me thinking, and I wondered about how you would do these things. And I found this video. First of all, this is a video on how to do stuff with an oscillator
I'm going to show you
and a scope.
how to draw mushrooms on an oscilloscope.
As you do.
with sound. We're gonna use our left audio channel for horizontal deflection, and our right audio channel for vertical deflection. Now first we need a sine wave on our horizontal deflection channel, and a cosine wave on our vertical deflection channel. Together they add up to a beautiful circle. We can alter its size and shape by increasing or decreasing the volume of both channels. Now we add a sawtooth waveform to the right channel. Our circle or ellipse turns into a spiral.
This is doing funny things to me.
Into the shape of a mushroom, we need to multiply our left channel.
I thoroughly recommend you watch that. But
that's amazing.
The reason I brought this up was this. This again came from David Bernhardt, who sent in a topic. This is these videos are by a chap called Jereboam Fenderson, who has started a Kickstarter. He's making a sort of art music that looks great on an oscilloscope, audio-visual album and software, and he's got a Kickstarter with 6 days to go. And look, he's only, whatever that is, $330 away from his $10,000 goal, €10,000 goal, sorry, to create this album. And the idea is, and there are videos of him doing, this is how to make this, and this is how to make these other sounds. But if you were to back this, you get, not only will you get the album, but you also get this piece of software and the patches to work on pure data to create these beautiful shapes. And I just thought it was a really beautiful idea. I know we've talked a little bit about creating sounds to. I think Chris Clark does stuff where, and there are other artists who make videos based on the scope, just so, and that goes along with the music, but it has a little relation to it. And this just seemed like such a lovely idea. And I don't know, Mark, have you messed around with the scope much and sort of tried to do any scope art?
I've never tried to do. I just basically been able to create a lot of really beautiful waveforms. There's a number of them in my Mac Pro video videos where I was comparing different waveforms from different synthesizers. But I don't know, I look at this, and when he's talking about sine waves, we're not hearing sine waves, and I kind of feel like that's what's going on there. And yeah, I don't know, but certainly waveforms are beautiful, but I don't really understand the mechanism of this and how it actually relates to the sounds being made. Could you make any sound into the shape of a mushroom, or is he saying that you have to use this combination of waveforms? Because even if you add a sawtooth to a sine wave, I don't understand how that makes a spiral. So yeah, I'm confused by the whole thing.
Yeah, no, I take your point, but I guess that's down to a bit of experimentation. We've got a scope here which I wanted to use for illustrating, but I've never been able to get it to look right. It always seems offset, or there's some DC offset, even though I bought a scope that's specifically designed to not have that. It seems to, I've got to spend a bit more time with it and see how I can fix that kind of stuff. But
there's some Euroack modules that do this, don't there? There's like a kind of a little underswell of like Euroack modules that are designed for outputting visuals.
Sort of video stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen a couple on Matrix synths and things in the past. So that must be something that's kind of being explored.
Yeah, I guess so. There's also this beautiful thing, which actually I think VCO ADSR had one in his rack. This is the O'Toole AMOLED oscilloscope, which does look absolutely beautiful, actually. And I did think about getting one of those, but then I realised I would have trouble outputting the screen into any meaningful forward, and I have to point a camera at it. But it's a nice idea. Yeah. I guess it seems like certainly visually, because you do a lot of stuff for the visual work with Mr. Jones. I could see his waveforms having a place there in some shape or form.
I love the idea of that. I mean, there's certain aspects. I think there's visuals generating capabilities with a bit of Max for Live that you can do integrated in Ableton as well. It's just another area I just haven't we haven't explored, but it's definitely an interesting area. It's nice when you get that real synergy of sound and visuals that are together, as opposed to just random images that some VJ's just putting up to fill the back space. Yeah.
I did notice, because I watched a bit of Glastonbury coverage, and there seemed to be, certainly on the main televised stages, a lot of really kind of advanced visual stuff. That was the Chemical Brothers I saw particularly, but they were superimposing that, so it was jumping out of the screen, which got really distracting for me. I'd rather have seen what they were actually using rather than sort of bit graphics. Sorry, Gaz.
The Flying Lotus stage. Flying Lotus did an amazing show, and the visuals on that. I don't know if that was being televised, but I think it has actually. But Flying Lotus, they did a thing where it looked like he was in a cube, sort of, and yeah. Mm.
Yeah, his stuff's supposed to be really, really good, actually. I know, because, Rich, you went to see Eamon Tobin, didn't you? Because we talked about his whole thing, and that was amazing from what you were saying. I guess,
it was.
Do you have a scope at your disposal to do some experimentation?
No, I don't. Not here, no. No, not here. I have worked in electronic shops where there were scopes, but I've never used it in the way that we're talking about. I mean,
I think it's a lovely idea, though, and perhaps something you can check out. So if you want to check that out, do go to Kickstarter. Hold on, where's the page there? It's the I think the project is called Oscilloscope Music, which I'm guessing you. Let's see if we've actually influenced any of that. So 670. No, we haven't managed to raise him any more money, but maybe we will ultimately, and it'd be nice to see that project come to fruition. Right, well, that kind of leaves Against the Clock, which I found. This is for Fact Magazine, which is basically get a bunch of people who work sort of solo electronic music producers, I'm guessing, to create a piece in 10 minutes against the clock. And some of them are successful and some of them are less so. This was really quite I'm not sure what this guy, what's he called? Mind Sign, I'm guessing that is. And he's got a lovely collection of instruments. Some of the stuff, the sounds that he was making were absolutely beautiful, but it was a really peculiar kind of groove because it was kind of like Thomas Dolby at his best, but with a really out-of-time drum machine. Yeah. But this is the format, so...
I'm about to go against the clock with Fact TV.
So they get the timer going, and then basically you're off. And most of them are using Ableton, and a lot of them are using... kind of pad-based controllers, but not this guy. He's got, I don't know what that synth is at the bottom.
Didn't I notice that pretty much all of them had the Native Instruments keyboard?
Oh, really? You think it might be some sort of promo thing? It's possible. I don't think this guy has. That looks like, let me see, what's that?
A lot of them did.
That look, I don't know what that is. It's not a Jopet 6. It's something, is it a Korg piano or something? But there was some nice stuff. But the rhythm was just really curiously wayward in that one. But if you check them out, there are some really good ones there. But the whole notion of this kind of performance, I know that, Gaz, you've been kind of right into the idea of just doing things here and now, like bang, do it out. I mean, those are the sort of creative limitations, but it's a great idea for a series. Maybe we should challenge some people in the chat room just to sort of, throw some ideas together and time limit them.
Well, I'm thinking I'm going to bring back a project that I'd launched about 10 years ago, which was song racing. And we did it on the internet. And the way we did it was various people we'd say they'd have to log into this forum at 7 o'clock GMT. And then there would be a post, which would be what the topic was about. And I remember a brilliant one, particularly. The topic was architecture. It's like, okay, off everyone goes. And it's the first person to upload it, then it's the winner. Oh, wow. But the good thing is that it can take a while. People can take 2 weeks. It doesn't matter if you don't win, but like slowly this album comes together in a song, and it's quite funny. So if you win, your song goes first.
I won the album.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. And no actual time limit. I guess harder to document on video, obviously, but
that's also very true. But it was a really good fun thing, and we did it 3 times, so we got 3 of these things together. And but I've also if I'm doing if I'm going to be doing some production work with a client, and it's going to be like maybe an album, there's a lot of work. I like to do a little song with them in an hour. And I've got I've got a countdown timer here, which I put, and set an hour counting down, and we've got to get the song finished. It's a brilliant icebreaker. It's such a brilliant icebreaker. You have to work so quickly and make decisions. Invariably, the music comes out a bit silly, but it works as a great icebreaker. So I think that these timed things is an enormously useful thing. I did an album with a brilliant musician. She's so creative, just actually being able to sort of make direct things with her was a bit tricky. So what we did was to give her 5 minutes to come up with an idea, and then 10 minutes to record it, and then 5 minutes. So we did it in 45-minute chunks with a 15-minute break, so you could have a little bit of a breather, and we did three. So we did 3 chunks over 3 hours, and got an album's worth of material together that way. And again, countdown timer was there, counting down, ticking down time. And it's a brilliant thing to do. It's just so good, especially if your time is limited and you just impose this kind of, and make it visual, don't hide away from it. It's great. You're looking at it, you're constantly aware of it. Yeah.
That does sound, I mean, also probably pretty good. I mean, Robbie, I'm guessing, you work to film, you work to, production and stuff. Do you ever kind of set yourselves those sort of challenges? Because I mean, it does sharpen up your musical chops and instincts, I guess. I mean, it was probably quite a good exercise generally, right?
I mean, I can work. I like working to deadlines. I can work like breakneck speed to the point where people who are sitting in with me just can't. It's that thing Gaz says. If I just get going, then it becomes a little bit kind of like you get in your own world. Nobody else can get a look in because you kind of know what you're doing, and it's you're huddled around the screen and all that stuff. So I can work like that. So I quite like the idea of I thought about doing that. I haven't done one of these things for a while, but I'm quite often doing 2 or 3 tracks in a week for different people from scratch. So
And that has the same sort of effect, I guess. Oh, yeah, Rich, yeah. I mean, I'm guessing, sometimes there must be instances in your day job when, you're right up against a deadline and there really is literally not much time to get things done. I mean, does that happen? And if so, does it happen? Oh, you're muted. Somebody gets a drink. Make it.
I did it. Yes, I did it. It happened 5 minutes ago.
Wow.
I just got a message saying you need to come here.
Oh, right. Okay.
We have something that has to be done against the deadline. So, yes, it does happen.
And did you find that, in your experience, I'm not necessarily with your current boss, but when those things happen, is the outcome generally compromised by the extreme time limitation? Or does it generate a different energy that creates something that you wouldn't ordinarily come up with?
I like answer B better, but I think it's a little of both. because you'll never know if you'd spent another week on it. It would have been better because it's got to be out the door by 6 o'clock or whatever it is. So, my own way of working, I reach decisions fairly easily, and I can build on those decisions fairly quickly, and I can get something done fairly fast. I'm not always working in environments where that's the case for the other people in the room, and they need to be accommodated as well. So that's as close to an answer as I can give you for that.
No, that's a good one. How about you, Mark? I mean, I guess because in terms of you're doing lots of videos as well. I mean, it's the same sort of applies to that output too. You have I've got to finish it tonight, or I've got to do this bit tonight. I mean, how about musically? Do you kind of give yourself those little challenges to try and generate that sort of stuff?
In every single demo. It's a little known fact that all of the music that you hear in my demos, whenever I do sound examples or the little songs, and even the themes, all of those were written in real time. I have to do this. I don't have time to sit down and write long, interesting, whatever. I just have to turn it on and go. So everything you see in all of my videos, including the songs that I play, are in real time. Even with like the Theravox, where it's one note at a time that I'm playing, I basically decide on a chord progression in my head and go for it. And I have to. I don't have time to sit down and think about it and write it all out. This is one of my favorite things to do in the world, and I would love to take this challenge. I do it every time I make videos. I mean, I love writing in real time.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, maybe there's something in there. Then maybe we can formalize something and try and create an environment where that would happen. I mean, I guess in the same way that when we work here we have people coming in, or we're shooting, it's like, well, I've got to finish it today. It's got to be done. So,
But lest it be, I did do the 5-minute song on Sonic Talk a few years ago.
That's right, you did, didn't you? Yeah.
Which was this kind of idea, wasn't it? Sort of, but
that was fantastic.
I don't know about that. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, so I think it's great. I'd love
5
to do
minutes. That's even half the time. That's but you were playing a lot of real time stuff.
That's
weren't you?
good.
Yeah, I tried to do it like a whole song with guitar, vocals, bass, keyboards, backing vocals,
Tambourine, I remember.
Yeah, tambourine, and lyrics, improvising, making up a song on the spot as well.
Yeah, that takes quite a lot of. No, I think the thing is when you're singing, it's a slightly it's almost like a kind of direct line into your innermost sanctum, and that's quite scary to many people. Sorry,
that's why pure nonsense came out of my mouth.
I seem to remember something about an attic because we got a subject, didn't we? I'm trying to remember.
Oh, that's right. We had words. We did. We had some words thrown in, didn't we?
That's
from
right.
The chat room.
Yeah, well, maybe we can work on something like that again. But it's very chaotic. But great idea. And if you haven't checked them out, I mean, they're not all great, but they all are quite interesting. And let me see if I went back. I don't know how many they've got now. Let's see if I got rewind. We've got this one's good. This is Gabby. She does one with vocals, just layering them up in loops. Danny Days, Mindsign. There's a good selection of them, and some, like I say, some are actually really good, and some are less fleshed out, I suppose, because many, and it's quite brave to take something like that on. I'm presuming they get a kind of like, if it doesn't work out, can it not go up? Because that's what I'd want to do, and that's that sort of, you get that scenario, don't you? It's like your worst nightmare where you suddenly have to perform in front of loads of people and you have no idea what you're doing. That's the sort of scary notion, but a good idea.
That's what I was doing on Saturday. Just no idea, just totally making it up, and it's kind of. And you lose it at times. It's like surfing. It's like you fall off waves, and you just have to kind of just get back up, and But music is like a conveyor belt to the listener. The listener's just hearing it moving constantly, and if things go a bit wrong, they don't mind if the thing is moving again.
Yeah,
They just forget about the bits that have just fallen off.
I mean, taking it, because I mean, in many ways, that's what a lot of these new pattern-based sequencers, and the Volkers and stuff, encouraging people to. The problem is when because of the limitations of a kind of one-bar interface, it's very hard to create shifts and movement and arrangements with that sort of stuff. You tend to kind of like turn things on, turn things off, and then filter a sound or whatever. There's an easy route and there's a more difficult route, and that is a very tough challenge, I think. And that maybe there are some interfaces that work better for that. I mean, certainly Ableton kind of really brought that up, but it does take a certain sense of mastery to be able to pull that off.
Demoing the Volcas was one of my hardest demos to do. For that reason, first of all, because I'm not a step sequencer person, although everyone's making me into a step sequencer person. But using those Volcas and having one measure to work with, it was really, really challenging. But it was also pretty fun.
I think one of the mistakes that one makes with certainly those kind of things is you tend to work at a tempo and go bum, 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 whereas you're much better off slowing it right down and creating much shorter sequences so that you've got a little bit more space between the events myself. Anyway, but that's a tip I'll pass on if anyone would care to choose to use it or not is another matter. Anyway, Rich, I detect that perhaps you've got to shoot off and go and do that very thing that we're talking about right now. Well, I wish you the best of luck, and thank you very much for hanging in there and for coming back online with your power failure. I really appreciate it. So we'll see you again very soon, I hope.
Thanks, Nick. A lot of fun.
Okay, and we'll also say goodbye to Gaz, who's out there in Bristol in the hot attic.
Yeah, hot attic. Yeah, I'm just making some crazy music at the moment. I've got a new handle I'm going to start using called Bad Workman. And then I can just
sounds like a town on the Rhine.
But it's a name. So when I'm sort of like playing around with the new gadget stuff, I'm just gonna chuck it out under Bad Workman, I think, because I can always blame my tools. Then you see.
Yeah, I like it. Nice little fry there. And Robbie, thank you also for joining us. You got more festivals lined up? You're going to be shooting off out the door to do more gigs?
I've got one in Exeter this weekend. Oh, I should say, I'll say I got a Rolly Seaboard this week, but I'll save that for another time.
Wow, I will be interested to know what you think about that. But yes, drop that little nugget in there. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us, Robbie, and I hope that your next gig you'll arrive in plenty of time. It's like one of those Irish sayings, isn't it? May you arrive in plenty of time for your next gig.
It is only 35 miles from where I live, Exeter, but that's not saying anything as the last one proved. But,
maybe you should get an overnight, stay in the hotel the night before just to be sure.
Yeah.
Or as I said, just get the helicopter to pick you up.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Why not? Rude not to.
Yeah. The pilot's just sitting around doing nothing, polishing his cap, otherwise he wouldn't be able to use it Anyway, Mark Doty, also thank you very much for joining us, and thank you to your bosses at the Moog Foundation to give up your time, because this is part of your working day, and I do appreciate you.
It is.
I'm sure you have numerous other matters to attend to, so thank you very much.
Oh, I do. Yes. Thank you to Michelle for putting up with this. But yes, and thank you, Nick, for having me.
Right, well, it's a pleasure as ever. Anyway, that's it for this week, and thank you very much for watching. Don't forget, if you want to enter the iZotope Ozone Competition, what you have to do is tweet out the hashtag 4EQ modes, the number 4, and then EQ modes, one word, and then the hashtag Ozone6 with 6 on the end, to @SonicState and @iZotope Inc., and then you may well be the winner of Ozone 6.1. And also, thank you very much, everybody, for listening, and all of those people in the chat room. And don't forget, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do go ahead. We very much appreciate it. Anyway, that's it for this week. Thank you very much. Goodbye.